Hello everyone, let me walk you through how to migrate your Delta data using the DDM tool, Delta Data Migration Tool, and SQL methods as part of your stage upgrade process. So the agenda for today will be to review the best practices for a stage server upgrade, DDM process considerations, planning, execution, resolving issues, and followed by a demo. As part of the process of setting up your staging server, it doesn't matter if you're setting up your staging server for your dev, QA, pre-prod, or prod staging server. You always have to make sure that you turn off certain processes before you even start your upgrade, right? So the prerequisites for DDM start right from the day you decide you're gonna do a stage server upgrade. So before even you restore your DB backup, you disable escalations and DSO if you're using DSO on the ER configuration. So for detailed steps on how to set up your staging server and different methods to do so are covered in the documentation link on this page. So as soon as you upgrade AR server, you should also disable the AR server services. And then after upgrading AR Atrium and CMDB, you need to make sure that CMDB processes and SLM and other processes are turned off. So after you upgrade your applications, you should be able to take a backup wherein you have restored your DB backup, you have performed the upgrade, and nothing else is running on the box. Everything is turned off. So you have your golden copy from your current production server restored on a staging and upgraded and ready, right? So if you want to do any testing or anything else, so you can do that, all that, and then once you want to perform your data migration, you need to revert back to this backup, and this is the backup you need to use for your data migration activities. Okay. So I'll walk you through a detailed process on how you can achieve that and when you can do your testings and so on and so forth. So let me walk you through the high-level summary of the state upgrade process. So there are 18 steps here, out of which the first 6 steps are the ones which are the most time-consuming activities. So step 1 is to perform your dev staging upgrade. So during these 6 steps, you don't have to do any freeze or any restrictions in your current production environment, right? So get a latest copy of your production server, restore it on your dev staging server, and perform your upgrade. So once you successfully perform your upgrade, if you're coming from a pre-7604 environment, you need to work on your overlays, create your overlays, right? And then convert your overlays to granular overlays by a process called three-way reconciliation, right? And then if you're coming from 7604 or later versions, you need to make sure that you convert your overlays to granular overlays before proceeding with your other activities, right? So step 2 is basically making sure that at the end of step 2, you have to make sure that you have a package which we call it as a deployment package, which is basically your customizations, right? So you should have a deployment package ready, and which you should be able to easily deploy on your QA environment and perform your UAT. And say during UAT you find more customizations you need to fix, you go back to your development environment and fix those customizations and create a new package, deployment package 2. The reason for this is because you've already gone through your UAT and QA based on your deployment package 1, so you don't have to retest it, right? That's why we recommend to have whatever more customizations you find during your testing, make sure that you create separate packages on those from your dev staging environment, so that you can import deployment package 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth, right? So now you have your deployment packages ready, which has all your customizations already converted to granular overlay and ready to go, right? Then you perform your UAT, and during your UAT, for all issues you find, either internal issues or issues you find within the product for which you got fixes from BMC, right? So make sure that you have a package for those. Make sure that you have a fixes package, workflow separately, data separately, so that way the data, any data fixes should go at a later point of time, right? So any other non-data fixes could be imported earlier, right? So at the end of these 6 steps, you should have your deployment packages ready and your fixes ready, like workflow, any other fixes you have to be ready, code fixes, plugin fixes, anything, right? And your data fixes, everything should be ready. So So these 6 steps, after these 6 steps, you are in a position that, hey, I have my customizations package ready, I perform my UAT, I have all my fixes ready. Now I'm ready to go and do my upgrade on my production server. So the production server is a very high level three-step process you need to do, right? Perform your upgrade, deploy your customizations, deploy your fixes, and you're ready, right? Ready for just migrating your Delta data and go live. So that's the reason these 6 steps are very important. And again, during these six steps, as I said, there's no restrictions in your current production, no restrictions, no freezes, right? Okay. Again, there's a documentation link here which will take you through the full process on stage upgrade, right? So let's say now you're ready to do your production staging server upgrade. So you have all your packages ready, fixes ready, you're ready to go, right? So now make sure that your mid tiers and other tools like Migrator are already installed and ready with latest version. And then basically what we say is, hey, from this step onwards, from step 7 to 18, all you need is a maximum of 5 to 6 days, right? And worst case scenario, if you want to add some buffer, maximum 10 days. That's it, right? So the primary thing which we talked to you on step 7 is basically make sure that if you can restrict or freeze your bulk activities, right? Anything other than manual data on your current production should be either stopped or slowed down. For example, if you can't stop your integrations or recon runs 5 days or 6 days before go live, it's fine. At least see if you can stop it 2 or 3 days before go live, so that we know that the volume of data is manageable for you to migrate and go live, right? And then the step 8 is a kind of a recap where you disable escalations even before you restore the DB backup on the server, and then you disable other processes during your upgrades, right? So that's what we talked about earlier. And then setting up your production server, and then upgrading all products. That's pretty much it. And then step 11 is basically we already have the packages ready. Go ahead and import those customizations and fixes, and then now you can take a backup and to do your sanity testing. So we don't recommend for you to do any more testing on your production staging server. So you should have tested everything on your UAT. So here all we need is a few hours, maximum a day. Even a day is too much. The primary goal is to make sure that you can do a sanity test to make sure you can point all your secondary service integrations, configure them, make sure they're working. In fact, the configurations could be even done separately, right? So you can configure it as long as now when you point it to the server, it should all work. So make sure that all the secondary servers are pointed, the integrations, everything is working, and then do your sanity testing, and then restore it back. So your configurations are good to go. So once you restore the DB backup from priority of testing, all other servers are good to go. You just need to you can bring them down, and in fact, when you bring them back up, everything is already pre-configured and it's going to work, right? So at that stage, so you completed the upgrade, you completed your sanity testing, and basically now you're ready to perform your DDM, right? So restore the DB backup before your testing, and then start your DDM. So we strongly recommend to run DDM every day. So for example, let's say it took 3 days or 5 days to do your upgrade, so run the DDM run immediately, even before your sanity testings, for example. So at least that will basically bring in the 3 days of data or 5 days of data, right? And then you take a backup and you can perform your sanity testing too, right? And then you run DDM every day, right, till the go live date, and do multiple runs on the go live date before you run the final DDM run, right? So I'll walk you through that in the following slides. So perform DDM, then after the final DDM, take a backup, perform post migration procedures, and you go live tasks, and you go live. So pretty much it. So it's an 18-step process. It always works, and if you follow the process, you won't have any issues in not to be able to upgrade your production staging server in 5-6 days or maximum of 10 days. Okay. So now let's go through the DDM process considerations, planning, and execution. So for the DDM process considerations, there are some activities which you need to do one time, and there are some we strongly recommend you to do before every DDM run, and some before and after. So the one-time activities are checking and fixing configurations, getting your data counts on the destination server to make sure there's no additional data sitting there which is going to conflict. So get those counts on the destination server based on your last upgraded date timestamp, right? And then clean it up. So there's links in the documentation which will tell you exactly what you can do and how you can get this done, right? And then count for any additional data added by the upgrade. You back them up and clean up. So if you need any of those data, you can always import them back later after the final DDM run by generating new IDs for them, right? So now before every DDM run, you do the counts to make sure that you know what you're going to migrate for that date range or date chunk. And then there are certain pre-checks you need to go through and see which is applicable for you and run it. There are 2 pre-checks which is mandatory for every customer. So go through those pre-checks and execute them so that you don't get those errors on the foundation forms like people, task, and those forms while doing a DDM run. And after every DDM run, make sure that your destination counts are okay, you're matching, or if it's a little bit over, you should know why they're over. Maybe there's additional upgraded data there, or if it's less, you have to make sure that, hey, did you have any errors, so that you have to rerun them and make sure those data comes over, right? So make sure that your count validation is done after every DDM run, so that you don't need to worry about them during the final DDM run or after the final DDM run. Once you do the final verification, we don't need to worry about any data mismatch. So we only concentrate on the final DDM run and counts before and after that, right? And of course, after every DDM run, fix errors, rerun, right, before you even move to the next chunk. That's very important, right? Okay, planning. There are various links here. I'm not going to go into detail on too much on these, but the links will give you all adequate information you need. So, for example, the first one is the supported migrated path. So, what versions we support, what products, you can look into that, and then basically your infrastructure requirements, like you need a separate migrator box for sure, and make sure there's nothing else is running on the box, and then just step 3 is, of course, that's the first step once you are ready, right? Running the counts, right? To know your volume of data, right? And how you can plan for it, right? Those kind of information. And then this is basically going to a little bit more detail on to check and delete data for any additional data you find on the destination server, right? And then this is basically for any installer created data which is created in any transactional forms or process forms which could conflict your data coming in, right? So basically it'll give you the steps on how you can find those and how you can back those and delete them, and then how you can re-import them later after the final DDM run. Okay, because if you don't proactively find additional data on the destination server, either added by your test data or added by the upgrade and deleted, if you don't do it proactively, it's still fine. The only thing is you will have errors in DDM during DDM runs on these, which will be called mismatch entry IDs. So that way DDM will give you those IDs which are conflicting. So you may have to go and either back them up or delete them, or just delete them, and then you can continue to do your DDM runs. So these planning steps are just to make sure that there is opportunities for you to proactively look for these additional data and clean them up. Otherwise, DDM will help you by pointing those out, so you can take care of them during your DDM runs, and you can move on. Okay, so SQL methods. So this for me, this comes up many times from customers. Hey, I have large data. So for example, if you follow this process which we just discussed today, if you're not going to have any more than 5 to 6 or maximum 10 days, so you don't have to worry about volume here. But let's say you still have for some reason a lot of volume in your area, so you can look at those. So basically, when you do your counts for your source server to plan your DDM activities in step 1 here before the slide, you will know that if there are any backend forms like custom forms, audit logs, notifier logs, if those forms are huge, for example, right? Like even though it's 5 days, let's say there's 1 million records, for example. If it's if it's an enterprise customer, there could be those kind of records, right? So we give you an accelerated method to migrate those data, so you don't have to just just do DDM for those. So basically, for the very first run on those from those forms, you can use the SQL method, which is described in this link, and bring in those data much quicker. And then subsequent runs, you can catch up with DDM and go live, right? So that is something which I want everyone to know about and use it. So, and because often I feel people like saying that, hey, I have to run DDM for so many days and I have large farms and all that. So please go through this and make use of it if you have those situations, right? And then the number 5 is basically performing your settings. For example, setting the max list query to 0, so DDM can query up to 50,000 records for it to grab and process every time, right? And then the pre-checks I was talking about, step 6. So pre-checks are something you might have to look into and run it every time before a DDM run, right? Whichever is applicable for you. Some of them are one time, some of them are every time you need to do. So go through those. And then number 7 is extending your DDM packages for customization. So there are scripts involved there which you could run, and it'll automatically grab your custom forms, and you can review them, and you can remove, add whatever you need. And then there's a second script available there in that link, which will basically help you to create the package for you to use. And there is a link for orphan data cleanup, so you can go through that link, so it'll explain you what that is. So optionally, during the planning stage, there are certain forms you can proactively go and clean up, because there are certain forms you might get errors during DDM run. For example, if you're done like moved people from one support group to the other, or taken a support group out of one person's profile, things like that, or if you change the first name, last name, or login ID. So those will contribute to orphan records, right? Because AR doesn't update records in those situations. It deletes and recreates. So when it deletes and recreates on those certain forms, what happens is the same record is there, but it has a different ID now, right? So that's going to conflict. So you'll get those errors. So these orphan records links, there are scripts there which you can run, and for those key forms, 5-6 forms, foundation forms like people, permission groups, support group, association, and so on and so forth, which you'll be able to get those IDs. And there's a second script which will help you to delete those orphan records on the destination server, right? And then you can also do this after your final DDM run, before you go live, just to clean up those data. There are certain forms where, like association forms and other forms in that list as well, in the link, which could hold data, orphan data, but they are no threat to you, so they won't cause any functional issues whatsoever. So if you have some more time, we can add those forms to this list, to the XMLs in the XML file, because by default they are disabled. Can enable them and run, but if you have time, because it's going to do full table scan and get to find all those orphan records. So only the forms which are enabled out of the box in those XML files in the link are needed for you to clean up. Others, if you want, you can clean up. Otherwise, if you have time, you do it. Otherwise, we don't recommend you need to worry about that. Okay. And then if you have process designer, there's something you need to follow to disable and enable certain XML files. So those details are covered in that step 8. Okay, now we come to execution. So as I said, so once you complete your production staging server upgrade, let's say you complete in 3 days or 4 days or 5 days, right, on the production server, then basically you run DDM every day, right? So so the first run you run, and then say if you want to take a break for a day because you want to do those integration testings and all sanity testings or whatever, a day or 5-6 hours, and after that restore back to the DB backup taken after the first run, and then you continue DDM run every day, right? Let's say on the day of the freeze, let's say you're freezing on a Friday evening at 6 o'clock. I want you to run DDM morning at 10, afternoon at 2, if you can again at 4 or something, so that when you run your final DDM run after your freeze, I don't want the DDM run to run for more than an hour or even more than half an hour, right? So that's where you should be, okay? And okay, let me go through some common errors you would see and how you can tackle them, right? So threshold errors. So if DDM encounters more than 1,000 errors for a form, for example, let's say you're running DDM for like help desk, and let's say you forgot to add a selection field customization on the target, so you're going to get error like value doesn't fall within the limit. Let's say there are more than 1,000 records in that, you're going to get 1,000 errors of the same error, value does not fall within the limit because you forgot to bring in your custom selection value, right? So if you get 1,000 errors, so DDM will stop and it'll skip that form and it'll go to the next form. So all you have to do in that situation is go fix that issue and then rerun with the same period and everything. So it'll skip everything else which is already migrated, and it'll only migrate help desk for you, right, for those 1,000 or odd records, right? In fact, sorry, for help desk it'll migrate everything all over because it stopped after 1,000, right? But for other forms it'll only migrate, it will, if it's already migrated, it'll skip it, or if it had some errors, it'll only migrate for those errors. And then entry ID mismatch error, right? So this is what I was talking about earlier, right? So for example, for any reason, if you had additional data on your destination server, you'll get this error, right? And then yeah, so the error will look like that. An error occurred in a form, and this is the error, like merge entry ID mismatch, right? So when DDM migrates, it basically uses a combination of the unique index value and field ID 1, right? So if either of the if the values are different in the destination, you'll get this error, right? So there's more details in the links, and you can go through them, and there's the section on the link how to like a step-by-step instruction on how to resolve this error. For example, pick the data and pick the ID, go look at it, and find the record which is conflicting, and you can delete it, right? And then they can rerun DDM. Okay, so this is more like a feature we have, right? So let's say you're migrating a data for a form, and then for some reason it timed out, the server timed out on you, or someone stopped the server, something like that. So what DDM will do is it'll capture the last successful ID, right? So when you rerun exact with all the parameters in the same date range, what it'll do is it'll catch up from that record it left out, right? So, and let's say it timed out, and say after in this example, after SRM request, for example, there are other forms. So till SRM request, it'll basically skip all the forms which is already migrated successfully. It'll come to the SRM request form, it'll pick up the last ID, and it'll continue it, and then it'll go and complete the migration for the rest of the forms. Okay. Okay, unique index. So typically you shouldn't get this error anymore, because previously we used to get this error before we implemented the merge ID mismatch, because we were not using the field ID 1 to compare, right? So now we are doing that. So we are basically helping you not to get duplicates, not to get this error from the database, right? So the merge entry ID mismatch is helping you to avoid any unique index errors thrown by the database, and to avoid any duplicates which could be created. Okay. And again, so if you do get the unique index error, then the documentation link also has steps on how to resolve this. Okay, so this is one example I told you when I talked to you about the first error too, right? So if you have a customization missing, you'll have something like this, right? Value does not fall within the limits, right? So you can go fix that in the destination server, and you can rerun. Okay, there's one error which could happen, which you could ignore, and that's basically called what do you say? It's called missing entry ID error. So I'm used to saying missing entry ID error. I was just looking for the correct word. So entry missing for entry ID. So that's what you'll get. But I'm used to saying missing entry ID error. So what will happen here is, let's say DDM caches some records to process, and while it's actually processing those records, if it doesn't find that record on the source server, it's going to give you this error. So this mostly happens on a live server. When if you're migrating data from a live server, what will happen is when it caches the record is there, but when it actually processes, the person even didn't save that record, right? So or they deleted it or something like that. So if you get this error, if you take this entry ID and if you go search in your source server, you will not even find it, right? So that's the reason you can ignore this error if you get it. But let's say you get this error for like 1,000 times, right? Then you can go and configure the threshold parameter to make sure that, hey, if you're only getting this error, you can extend the threshold to 2,000 or 3,000, so you don't get the threshold error for this kind of an error, right? So that's something you can do. Again, that's also covered in the documentation links. Yeah, so this is a rare error which could happen, but I just threw it out here so that I mean I can show it to you. So if for some reason there's some data issue here, right, you'll get some errors like this. So when DDM is trying to bring a record, it's only expecting one record to be found, right, when it's trying to bring a record. So in some cases like this, like due to some data issue, you could, if it finds multiple entries, it's not going to migrate, right? So it's going to give this error and it's going to stop. So for this kind of an issue, you may have to go fix the data and the source. For most of the errors, we don't want to fix anything on your source, because your source is a golden data, and it's a production server. We don't typically want you to touch anything there, right? But in this kind of an issue that you are forced to go fix your data in your production, if you have duplicate records, if you have other data conflict, data issues, you may have to go fix the data on your source. But typically, you will not be fixing any data on the source. You'll be fixing data on the destination. Okay. So yeah, so once you complete your DDM runs and successfully migrate all your data, then you need to go and complete the post migration activities. These are very important because these are the scripts which will there are certain steps here, and one of the steps is basically there are scripts which you should run, which basically the upgrade would have run during the post upgrade to do some data transformation activities like massaging data, looping through, change records to fix some approval rule, and so on and so forth, right? So those activities are there, those scripts are there, and then there are other activities, other scripts, and other links which you're supposed to run, right? And there's validations, there's fixing next IDs, there's running the multi-tenancy tool for Delta data. So there are a lot of activities you need to perform. So you should allocate at least an hour on your go live for these activities. And with that, let's go to the demo. This is the main page for migrating Delta data, main page for DDM. So if we look here, we talk about this is basically a main overview page. So this page has all the information you need and the links you need to go and come back, right? So what I recommend you to do is, for example, if you want to know about for example, it says, hey, before you begin DDM, install migrator, right? So this takes you to the page where you can know how to install migrator and what to do, right? So if you always open a new tab. That's what I recommend, so that you can come back to this page. So this page is about the staged upgrade process. So if you go here, open in a new window or new tab, it'll take you to the staging, how to set up a staging server, and how to prepare yourself for the stage upgrade. So it has a nice diagram here on what are the activities you need to do in your development environment, what activities you do on a QA, and what activities you do on a prod staging, right? All these are considered staging servers, right? So yeah, so that's what I recommend. So go through each links, open in a new window or new tab, so that way you can always come back and perform these steps. So perform stepwise, and then basically there are like nine prerequisite steps before you click any button to perform Delta data migration. So these are the preparation steps, and then there are a few links here on how to perform your DDM run and how to review and resolve issues, and so on and so forth, right? So everything is here, one page which we set it up for you. It should be, this is basically the page you need to know. You don't have to download any PDFs or whatever. Just have this link with you. Go through this step by step, and you should be able to complete your DDM in a much efficient and a much quicker way. So there are two key things you need to do to configure, right? One is going to the advanced settings in the computer, in your computer properties, to make sure the environment variable has environment variable path variable has the migrator directory path. So if you edit the path variable here, if you see, I have already added this. So you need to add this after the last semicolon, the whole path of your migrator directory. So that's one thing. So otherwise you will get an error. And the second thing is about updating the configuration file. So I've already I thought I already opened it. That's okay. So let me open it. So open the configuration XML file inside the Delta data migration folder. So there you'll see a working directory, Delta working directory. So you'll have the path as well. So make sure that you have the migrator path in there as well. So those are the two main configurations. There are other configurations also discussed in the link, which you could review and and use it as you need. So the other ones are not mandatory. It's all based on situations, right? And then performing server configuration adjustments. So here we mainly talk about setting your max Helix entries 0, so that you can DDM can query query at a maximum of 50,000 records in one query from the source server, right? So if you set it to 20,000, then it'll only pick 20,000. But if you set it to 0, then it'll pick the maximum. So we talk about that, setting the max entries to query to 0, and then disabling full text search localized server. So we talk about all this, and then we also talk about setting the isolation level if you have SQL Server, if auto commit is off, things like that. And then we also talk about the key things we talk about is additional configurations on source server for large forms. So let's say you have a form like help desk and work log, and if they have like more than like 500,000 or million records, we strongly recommend that to work with your DBA and add an index on field 6, which is the modified date, because DDM uses modified date to query data from your source, right? So if you add a index there, even it could be a temporary index, right? And then they could delete the index once you go live, right? So pick out your larger forms where the total volume is greater than 500,000 or 1 million, and make sure that you add index in field 6. So to get 100 records out of 2 million, say it takes more than like 5-6 minutes or even 10 minutes, right? Once you add the index, you will see that it'll bring the same data within less than a minute. And then there are two other key steps which you need to do. Is one is searching for additional data, right? And then making sure you estimate your data volume, right? So searching for additional data is basically running the error entry counter utility on the destination server to see if you have any additional data, and if you have, make sure that you either take a backup and delete them if you want the data. If you don't want it, just delete them. So those kind of things. And then estimating your volume is about knowing your data volume, so you can plan your DDM runs. So you may if you have large amount of data, you may have to run DDM in different chunks, smaller chunks, right? Or you may need more than one box, one migrator box, where you can split the date ranges. Say, for example, if you want to run it for a month, but then you only want to run it for 15 days in one box at a stretch. So what you could do is you could have two boxes, and you can run the first 15 days on the first box and second 15 days on the second box at the same time in parallel. So that'll help you to improve your performance as well. So many of those scenarios are discussed in here, and you can review that. Okay, let me go back to the demo and let's walk you through some scenarios here. So we talked about configuration. Now, once you before you launch, you can, as I said, you can go and do your counts to make sure you know your data volume for your date range. So you can use the error entry counter utility, and you can run counts to know your data volume for a given date range. So it has a capability of accepting a start date and end date, right? So you can do many chunks. Let's say if you're doing a 1 month chunk, if you see that even that is too much, you can reduce it, and you can do multiple chunks and create a spreadsheet and put those things there. For example, for AR package, if you want to run like 3 DDM runs, so note this down, right? And let's say even for CMDB you only need 2, but this doesn't matter because for AR you need 3. So that way you can easily make a plan that for every product I'm going to run 3 runs, right? Something like that. So whichever will be easy for you to follow and do it. You can also go even in a different way. Say that, hey, for AR I want to do 3 runs. For CMDB I want to do 2. For incident management I want to do 6 runs. You can do that. You can go do that as well, as long as you maintain a spreadsheet and you know exactly how you're going to run it, right? But if you want to keep it simple, just use smaller date ranges, multiple boxes, and then keep running all the products at the same time, right? That's the key. So make sure you get your volume on your source, and make sure you don't have any data on the destination which is going to conflict. So it can be a little bit proactive, right? Even if you get further conflicts while you're running DDM, that's still okay, because those will be smaller conflicts which is unknown for you, which you can take care. But anything major, like if you know that you're going to have like hundreds of test records, and then it's better to go clean them up first, right? Otherwise, DDM will give you an error called merge entry mismatch. Then it'll help you to find those records, and you can clean them up and rerun DDM. So let's launch the tool and get a migration going. Let's get the destination server. So now that the source and destination servers are launched, you can look at the source version, destination version, watch what products are installed in your source. So those will all come up, and then the ones which are highlighted in red, those are the products which you don't have in your source server. So you don't have Atrium Integrated Engine, you don't have BPPM, or you don't have IBRSD. So that's what it talks about. So for this demo, let's run for ITSM Foundation, because I want to show you some errors and then reruns examples. So now let's say I'm running from 1st May and no end date, and I uncheck the rerun because it's going to be the first run. So that's my date, and then once I run migrate, it's going to give you a confirmation dialog, right? Hit yes. So we should be concentrating on a form called CTM people. So that's where I've created some scenarios where you will receive some errors, and then we can see how we can troubleshoot those. Since this is ITSM Foundation, it's going to be running other forms as well. Now the migration is completed. Let's go look at the working folder in the log. So if you go to the working folder, what you should be looking for is some text files. So these text files will have the IDs which DDM will use for the rerun. So that means it has some failures, and it'll use for rerun. So if you look at foundation elements, if you see there is like 4 or 5 records for CTM people which has errors, and a bunch of records for notifier log. And if you look at asset inventory, there's 1 error in AS3 attributes migration. Then contract management failure, there's like 1 error. So the same information with more details could be found in the logs. And this text file, to be honest, nobody should be touching it, because this is what DDM will use to rerun. So if you look at, let's look at the foundation elements, for example. So what DDM would have done now is, since it completed the migration for all the forms, and it found 2 forms where it had errors, right? So let me look at that again. I'll show it to you. So look at the foundation failure. So 2 forms had errors, right? People and notifier log. So for every other form here, you'll see that it has a status as completed. So if you see here, it has status as completed. Okay, if you look at notifier logs, you will see status complete with errors. So what it'll do is when you run DDM in a rerun mode with exact same selections, exact date criteria, everything, what DDM will do is it'll retain these XML files. It'll not overwrite. It'll retain these XML files, and it'll skip all the forms and only look at forms which has completed with errors. Then it'll go to this text file and only process those records. So that's how the rerun works. So for some reason, if you made a mistake in your rerun, and if you selected a different products or different date time ranges, then this working folder will get overwritten. Then DDM will be running for all the data all over again. So you have to be careful if you want to do reruns. You have to be very careful in making sure that you run a rerun so that you only get the data migrated for the forms where you had errors. Okay, that's what I want to show you that. So now if you go to the logs folders, let's look at the HTML file for ITSM Foundation. So once you open any HTML log, I wanted to search for three keywords. The first keyword you search is for error. For errors, it says found more than 100 errors. So if you look for the errors, the error is about merge entry ID mismatch. So this means that this is not a product issue, right? So this is telling you that, hey, I'm trying to merge this record, but this ID is already taken up by another record on the destination server. So this data could be added by an upgrade, or it could be a test record. So you need to go find this record on the destination, delete it, and if you need it, export it. If you don't need it, delete it, and then rerun DDM. So this record will get migrated. So the same thing you need to do for any errors which has merge entry ID mismatch, right? So I keep scrolling down. So now you get a bunch of errors again, and okay, now this is a different errors, right? It says value does not fall within the limit. So this is something I did it purposefully for to show you this error. The reason I'm showing you this error is there is a known. This is a known issue where we have an integer field in people form, right? In CTM people, TMS task, and a couple of other forms, where the integer field will have a negative value, and that's a product issue, by the way. It's been there for in older versions. So so when DDM is trying to migrate, it is not able to migrate a negative value to a positive integer field. So there is a prerequisite here to perform pre-checks. So if you go to the documentation section here, there is a section to say perform pre-checks. So if you go to this pre-checks link, it tells you about there are certain things which you need to run before you run DDM. So here, that's why I purposefully showed you this error, where you could have easily avoided this error by doing the pre-check for this error. So if you look at it, there's a pre-check here which says update negative values, right? If you click here, there is a script you need to run. So if you go run this update script, right? So there's a SQL script, a select script, and an update script, right, for TMS. So if we run this, this also covers the CTM people form and other forms as well. So let me show you this. So if you go to utilities, pre-DDM, you see there's two SQLs here. One is a select, one is an update. If you open the select one, see if it's covering 4 forms. Those select statements are there, and then the update statements has a fix for that. So you need to be running these select and update statements in your source database, right? So once you run that, then these errors will go away. So otherwise you may have to run this before and after every DDM run if you're running DDM from a live server, because let's say you run a DDM run today and then you're going to run a DDM run after 2 days, but the 2 days there's possibilities that you may have some more negative values, right? So that's the reason you need to run these scripts before and after every DDM run, right? So any pre-checks which is applicable to you, you need to go look at those and then make sure you run them before and after. Some are one-time activities, some are before and after, right? So that's something I wanted to show you. That's why I showed you. So if you run that SQL, then the negative values will go away and it'll get updated as 0, and then you can run DDM. Then when you rerun, so these four records which failed will get fixed, right? And then there's 2 records here, so 2 records which has that issue. Now there's another record here again which I created for this scenario, where it says this field has a selection value which is different, right? So I have 0 and 1, but then you have a different value here, right? So I'll walk you through that. And then here it says low value high, which is similar to this, right? And then one example I have is a merge entry ID mismatch. Again, I'm going to explain you this error as well. I go to the people search here. So let's look at these records here. So let me take the first one. So if I go search for this ID, so this one talks about valid does not fall within the limit. People 2008. Okay, this is the destination server. Let's look at the source server. So if I the source server, this is the field. See, this has a negative value, so that's why it was not able to migrate the data. So once I fix this to 0, for example, and save it, again, you won't be able to do it on the UI here because this is a hidden field. I just made it non-hidden just for the demo purpose. So for you have to run the SQL to fix the data, right? Because these fields are disabled, right? So once you fix this data, and then when you read an DDM, it'll migrate the data. So I'll come back to that, but let me fix these. So 209 209, I'm saving that, then 214. So we fixed those 3 errors now. So now let's go back to the other error. So the next error we have is max selection. So let's see what's going on here. So let's look at this record here. So again, go to the source, search for the record. So here you see the client sensitivity value. This is the thing, right? It has a null, right? Again, it has a different value. So what I did was I manually added a custom value called I think 2, I believe, right? So that record is not there on the destination, right? So if I go to the destination here, search for the same record here. So destination, see that the record has a proper value. So let me go and fix this value. So basically the error, what the error is telling is it's saying the value does not fall within the limits, and it's not the max allowed values are 0 and 1. I've given some other value, right? So as I said, I gave a value of 2 or something. I changed it. So that this is an example where, say, you have a customization. So you have let's say you have extra value added there in the selection alias. So let's say you didn't bring that over to the destination server, so you'll get a similar error. So just for me to show you how to fix why those errors will occur and how you can fix that is the reason I'm showing you this example. So let me put this back to standard, for example. That's what it is, right? Yeah, and then I save it. So now when I rerun it, the data will go through. So now let's look at the other issue here. Yeah, merge entry mismatch. So what's happening here? So you need to go and grab this record. So go to the source. So now if you see here, this people 3006 is for login S test, right? So now let me go and check this 3006 belongs to what record on the destination server. So in the destination server, we look at here. So this record is belonging to test. So if you look at the general tab, more details tab, you'll see that this was modified on 5/24. Look at the last modified. This was modified on 9/6 p.m. So where in here it was modified on 5:33. So that means someone has created this record, a test record, which has taken up this ID. So all we need to do here is delete this record. Now we know that this is a test record. I can safely delete it. So I'm going to delete this record, right? So now when I rerun DDM, okay, profile status must be delete. Let's do that. Now the record is deleted. So what I would recommend is, again, right now what I did was I gave me an error and I did it, right? So those errors are coming based on a workflow, right? So what I really recommend is, before you delete a record, you go find out any delete filters for this form, for any form which has errors, and suppress those, disable those delete filters temporarily. So once you disable those delete filters, any of these workflows will not fire. So you'll be able to safely delete. So for example, let's say you have created an incident record and then that is conflicting. So if you delete them, then without disabling the delete filters, you will have cascading effect, right? So it might give you other errors. It will try to go delete other child forms, so which you can avoid cleanly. So I strongly recommend you to go and disable delete filters before deleting a record, and then you can enable it back later. Okay. So now if I look at it, we have concentrated on these areas and we have fixed all these errors. So now let's see if I can rerun DDM, and it'll only run for the failed forms, and then for the forms which we have not fixed, you're going to still get those errors, right? So for example, notified log had like 75 errors, which is all the mismatch entry IDs. People form had these 6 or 7 errors which we fixed, and then we have AST attribute with a couple of errors. So if we go and run DDM again, and if you forgot like what selection you did, you can always go back here and you can check, hey, this is what I selected. So I selected ITSM Foundation, right? I selected the source version, destination version, and you can know exactly what date range you gave and everything. So that now when you launch it, you know you're going to run a rerun, right? So you can do that. So you you can get the information from the configuration file. Sorry, from the data migration file. So grab the source version. Now I need to select exactly as last time. You have to make sure you select the exact previous selection. So if you see here, read an application with previous criteria. So what is the previous criteria? Your previous criteria was you only selected foundation. So let's do that. Right, let's say even you had selected foundation and some other application, and say you never had any errors in say for example you had ran for asset management foundation. Let's say asset management had no errors, but still you still have to select it. Otherwise, what will happen is it'll overwrite the working folder. In fact, I'll show you that right now, and it'll give you a warning. So I'll show you that. So remove that thing. So this is what we gave, right? May 1st, 2020, nothing, right? So now if I hit migrate, you'll get a warning. So if you select different products and different date ranges, so you'll get a warning message saying that below information differs from your previous selection. If you chose different parameters the previous selection, this will override previous selection. Do you want to proceed? So make sure that if you get a warning note like this, you're going to say no, right? If you say yes, what will happen is it'll override the working folder with the new XML files, copy it from the package folder, and you will lose all the status complete with errors and all that good stuff. So make sure you say no, and then reselect what you just wanted to do. See, this time you won't get any warning message. So this is just a note. Make sure everything is good. So click yes. So now you will see it'll skip everything whichever is completed, and it'll just go. See, skipping completed data migration for schema. See, it just goes in that, and then it'll only do those 4 or 5 forms. And this time all the deck records in CTM people should go through. See, all 5 CTM people completed. And yeah, notified log, you're going to get those 75 messages because there were 75 records which failed, so that'll take a while. So that's the basic thing, right? So make sure you have your date ranges, and I would recommend to have a spreadsheet to make sure that how many runs you're going to run for each product, and then the date ranges and the counts before and after. Those are very, very key things, right? And then after that, once you run it, you should not go and proceed to the next chunk or the next run if it's that same box without fixing the errors, rerunning and moving over. Let's say for example in this exercise I only fixed the errors for CTM people. Now you cannot move forward, right? So you need to go fix the errors for notifier log and AST attributes, right? And then you need to rerun again, right? And then that one should not have any other errors. Everything should get completed. All the records should get migrated for the date range. Only then you proceed to the next product selection or next chunk in this box. Otherwise, you cannot do in this box. So let's say you want to run a different chunk for the same products, then you have to go have another migrated box and run it there. And in both boxes, don't proceed to the next chunks and next criteria or selections before running DDM, rerunning DDM for multiple times, or how many ever times you need to make sure that all the data got migrated. So only then you will make sure that the data is migrated for the date chunk. Then you move to the next chunk. So once you do that, you don't have to look back at all. Say after in the last few days and you're running the final DDM run or whatever. So you don't have to look back, and even to the end users or the end customers, you can always give a report saying that hey, you can give a report after every DDM run saying that hey, this is completed, no errors, and moving on, right? So even if there's any count mismatch, you can analyze those mismatches and keep things ready, so you don't have to scramble at the last minute saying that hey, after my final DDM run I'm still seeing count mismatches, why? So if you should have an answer for that even after the first to second DDM runs where you're doing your count validation. You'll have an answer saying that the records are not matching because additional records got created and we deleted and we are re-importing back, or there's extra records sitting there because they're orphans. So it could be any explanation, but you'll be able to get those answers after every DDM run when you do the count validations before and after, right? So that's something I strongly recommend. So once this is done, if you go back to your log file, you'll see the second HTML file, right, which ran. So that'll give you the current one. So it would have skipped migrating for all completed ones. See, skipping completed data migration, right? And then it only tried to do those 4 forms, right? So people had completed everything, so all the 5 issues we fixed, and then notify log and the other form, everything is there, and then you'll have a total results here, which will tell you how it went through. So the other 2 errors I want you to search are warning and threshold. So threshold and server timeout, right? So if we search HRE threshold, right? If you don't find anything, it's good, because usually threshold is something where if a form has more than 1,000 errors, you'll have the threshold error, right? So you can search for that. You can search for server connection, something like that. So server connection timeout, right? So if you just search for timeout, you'll see many entries, because we do put the timeout entries here before each form, because as I said, we wait for 3,600 seconds, which is an hour, for the data to fetch from the source server. But we don't want that. So if this is a huge form, please add an index on field C6 so that the query will come much faster. So if we just search for timeout, you'll have many entries. So that's why search for server. So server should give you that. And even if you find something for server, then search for server connection. So usually you'll get an error saying that server connection timeout, right? So anyway, so that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. I wanted to cover the basics, making sure that you run, if you get an error, how to error handle, how to rerun, and this is a repetitive process. So once you do that, that's all this DDM is all about, right? And then pre and post DDM scripts, right? So pre scripts, I told you, right? So not too much to worry about on pre. It's basically the sequels. And then there are certain things you need to go manually take care based on the documentation. So those are what they are. And then for post EDM, there's a good section in the documentation which will walk you through what changes went through each of these products in during the upgrade, post upgrade, what massaging or transformation the post upgrade does, and what we're doing here. We're basically redoing and re-executing those scripts to make sure that the data transformation changes or massaging the data, updating the data happens even after after DDM. So for example, let's say a form had 100 records during upgrade, then these massagings and data update would have happened during the upgrade itself, because upgrade would have triggered those scripts. Let's say you move 10 records during DDM, so those 10 records should go through the same data transformation changes. So for that reason, you have to run these, right? And there's something called running post migration procedures for multi-tenancy and so on and so forth. So all those are covered in detail in the documentation steps. So if you go back to the documentation here, it's all in the one page you need to worry about, right? So go to this page and open each of these links in a different tab or different window, so you can go back to this page and see where you are, right? So here you are, where performing the DDM run, reviewing and resolving issues. This is what we went through, and all resolving issues are here. For example, the one we just saw, right? Merge ID mismatch, how to solve that, how to solve unique index values, how to solve a threshold error if it is specifically for merge entry ID, missing entry ID, sorry. All those are covered. So merge entry ID, what kind of error you will have, and then how to resolve unique index on merge entry ID. So basically grab the ID, go to the source server, and then search. That's what we did. Go to the destination, find the value. If it's conflicting with field ID 1, search with field ID 1. If it's conflicting with the unique index, then use the unique index value, not field ID 1. That's why it's for both scenarios. So either search its field 1. If you find a record, you fix that. If that's the record, it is conflicting. If the record is conflicting based on the unique index value, in this case, say field 179, then use that to search and then go and review the data and then go delete it, right? Yeah, and then run the DDM again with the same product selections for rerun, so that it only works for the rerun scenario, right? We talk about threshold errors, right? So you don't have to resolve threshold errors. Basically, if the threshold error is happened only for a missing entry ID kind of error, then you can fix it. Otherwise, usually these threshold errors are basically actual data errors. Like say if you have missing if you have like this error, like unique index or mismatch entry ID, or if you have like say value does not fall within the limits, if those are the errors you get for thousand times, yeah, then those are the errors you need to fix. But if you say the 1,000 errors are specifically for just missing for entry ID, something like that, yeah, then you can basically go and change the configuration parameter to go set it to like 2,000 or 3,000 or whatever, right? So that way this error will not block you from moving forward, right? So yeah, so all those are covered in detail here. You can use this documentation. And then, as I said, if you just go back to this page, just follow these, and then this scripts for deleting orphan records on these forms, which are the key forms you need to worry about, and then performing the delta data migration until you go live, running it every time, and then validating your accounts before and after. So all that is covered, and then the post migration procedures are also covered there, right? So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover is the demo.